All right. Breaking news. Hezbollah has confirmed that in the strikes that Israel did on Friday in Beirut, they did in fact kill Hassan Nasrallah. That he's the leader of Hezbollah, has been the leader of Hezbollah since 1992. So, of course, the Israelis celebrate. Um, what should we think about the death of Hassan Nasrallah, and what was wrong with him, and what should they do instead? Anyone who's resisting the occupation, the brutal, tyrannical, racist occupation of the Palestinians. So I have suggestions on all of that. So look, guys, as you know, our show's live weekdays, 6 to 8 p.m. Make sure you're checking it out live, and we'll have way more details on Monday. But I wanted to give you an update here as I do in the weekends. And please become a member and support honest programming here. As I'm going to be very honest with you here, and of course in American media that's usually not allowed. But I'm going to give you nuance here. And so was Nasrallah a bad guy? In a lot of ways, of course he was, and he was also a complicated guy. Now, there are people who will tell you, no, the world is black and white, and anyone we declare a terrorist, especially if they're Muslim, there's nothing complicated about them. They should be murdered at any time by the Israelis or the Americans, and they deserve it. And that's the end of the story. And they were doing it for no reason at all. They were just doing it because they hate America or Israel or Jews. That's obviously comically wrong. And people who say things like that, uh, they're telling on themselves. They're saying either I'm giving you super simplistic propaganda on purpose, or I'm just a simple person. I don't understand complicated issues at all. So why is Nasrallah complicated? So here is massive downsides, in my opinion. Number one, when you go to attack Israel violently, um, civilians are going to get killed. I condemn it when Israel does it. I condemn it when Hezbollah does it. So that's I mean, that is an enormous mark against someone. So is it true that Netanyahu has killed so many more civilians than Hassan Nasrallah? Yes, it's not even close. Netanyahu wins that terrorist competition by a long shot. Um, I know the Israelis still say comically and tragically that when they drop a 2,000-pound bomb in a residential area, they don't intend to kill the civilians underneath that bomb. If you believe that, you're probably an Israeli or a US politician, or you work in mainstream media and can't tell what's true at all. And your job is to lie to your viewers and your readers, etc. Yeah, no, when you drop a 2,000-pound bomb on civilians, you intend to kill civilians. Israel didn't accidentally kill over 30,000 civilians in Gaza. They did it on purpose. Those things are obvious. It's not like, oh, the bomb slipped out of the plane again for the 10,000th time in a row. No, they did. And so now that doesn't make what Nasrallah did any better in that regard. So there's a second giant problem with Nasrallah. He's a fundamentalist. And as anyone who watched the Young Turks knows, I can't stand fundamentalists. He, spoken favorably about the fatwa on Salman Rushdie for just writing a novel. Oh, I hate that. Any kind of violence against civilians because you disagree with their ideas or they have offended you in some way, it's outrageous. It's so I did not like that about Nasrallah at all. By the way, of course, again, Israel says if you say things against our occupation or you resist our occupation in any way, we get to kill you. So, and by the way, there is no, as we're going to get into in a second, for the Israelis, there is no legitimate way to resist their occupation. You must surrender. You must agree to live in their concentration camps. Yeah, I said the word. We'll get to that in a sec. And you must say, no, the Israelis are leaders and and we report to them, and they, of course, they should get to occupy and humiliate Muslims for as long as they like, and they have special privileges. So I know the Israelis believe that, but the rest of the world is absolutely sick of it. So is violence the right way to fight against that? No, it's not. It is both strategically and morally wrong. Now, let's tell you about the things that Nasrallah did that you might not know. Did you know that he beat back the occupation of southern Lebanon? So Now, again, Israel will say, "How dare you? We were going to occupy and steal that land too, and we're going to set up a huge concentration camp in southern Lebanon for more Muslims that we control tyrannically." But this terrible resistance fighter slash terrorist prevented us from occupying even more Muslim land. We hate him. Of course, we had to murder him. He prevented part of our occupation. Israel, are you proud? Are you proud that you killed a guy who prevented you from occupying more Muslim land? Would you have just been elated? Yes, we get to denigrate and humiliate more Muslims. This is what Israel's becoming. It breaks my heart. I know Israelis, a lot of right wing Israelis don't believe that. Plenty of people do, even inside Israel. But Israel was supposed to be a safe haven for Jews. I have so many Jewish friends that I grew up with. I will not tolerate any anti-Semitism. This isn't about Jews overall. That's insane. In fact, I think the fact that Israel, I think Israel is hurting my Jewish friends by associating them with this terror state, and they didn't sign up for that. They didn't vote. They're not Israelis. They didn't vote in Israeli elections. They're not Israeli leaders. They're not right wingers. So for God's sake, do not ever take it out on anyone who's Jewish. That is wrong. That is against, that is the kind of immorality that we fight against. But when it comes to the right wing government of Israel, and look, have there been left wing governments of Israel? Barely. On domestic issues, certainly. On foreign policy and Palestinian issues, Ehud Olmert, I thought, had a decent peace proposal in 2008, and I wish they had gotten that done. That one's also complicated, but it's to say that there is nuance. The Israelis are human beings just like anyone else, and they're also complicated, and their leaders are also complicated. But overall, has the Israeli policy against the Palestinians been right wing, dictatorial, and tyrannical for the last 57 years? That's inarguable. Totally, utterly inarguable. The only argument against it is a racist argument where Israelis say the Palestinians are such violent savages as they violently occupy the Palestinians and deprive them of all of their rights and humiliate and denigrate them for 57 straight years. They have the temerity to say that the Palestinians are the violent savages and they deserve their occupation. And they're the only people in the world that cannot govern themselves. They're constitutionally not capable of it. So Israel will have, according to Netanyahu, a permanent occupation of the Palestinians. Well, that's what they were going to do in South Lebanon until Nasrallah and Hezbollah stopped it. So again, if you're Israeli or American, you will say, "How dare you resist our occupation? You're a terrorist." Others will say, "Oh, well, that's an upside on Nasrallah. At least he saved millions of people from more tyranny from Israel." I'll let you make your judgment call on how you feel about that. Now, of course, he was in favor of 9/11, right? Because a dirty terrorist Muslim savage. No, no, actually, he was not in favor of 9/11. Let me read you his quote on that. "What do the people who worked in those two World Trade Center towers, along with thousands of employees, women and men, have to do with war that is taking place in the Middle East? Therefore, we condemn this act." Huh, interesting. Did you know that Hezbollah, while firing into Israel, is trying to hit military bases? Now they don't often, and so one of their rockets either got knocked down or missed, and it killed 12 kids in northern Israel. I condemn that with all my might. Those are 12 innocent kids that didn't deserve to die. So you're trying to hit a military target, but you killed civilians. Isn't that what Israel does on a mass scale every day, including today? Even after they killed Nasrallah, they continue to bomb residential areas of Beirut. The bombing is endless. If you resist Israel in any way, if you're in the Middle East, you're almost certainly going to get killed. Even if you report on it, 2 different American journalists have been assassinated by Israel. So these are facts, and they make Israelis uncomfortable. Well, you should be uncomfortable. Your government is doing tyrannical, awful, horrible, racist, murderous things. So I'm not the one making you uncomfortable. The facts are. So now, so I'm happy to say that Nasrallah was a terrorist because he killed civilians. But do we play by the same rules? Will Israel also say, "Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. By Israeli definition, by American definition, that would make Netanyahu 10 times, 100, maybe 200 times a terrorist that Hassan Nasrallah was." because he says he's trying to hit military targets and he's butchered tens of thousands of civilians. Way, way, way worse than Hassan Nasrallah. So again, it doesn't excuse Nasrallah at all. Here, I'll tell you another terrible thing Nasrallah did, and then I'll get back to another complicated thing. Said in Magic 15, Jesus UCSB. Thank you guys for the super chats. Appreciate it. Try to give shout outs to that and members as we go. But let's keep going. And of course, the join button below is how you become a member. I appreciate everybody who allows us to do this show that's honest. So Nasrallah also supported Bashar al-Assad in Syria, the butcher of Syria. So I think that's terrible. I condemn him for that. Okay. Okay, now he obviously hates Jews, and the only reason he's attacking Israel is because he's so anti-Semitic, right? Nope, that's another myth that you heard in American media. Here's what he said in reality. Our problem with the Israelis is not that they are Jews, but that they are occupiers. Okay, that's true. Okay, so now you can say, I don't believe him. Okay, fine, no problem. I don't believe a word Netanyahu says. I am very reluctant to believe anything a leader of Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. says. I get it. They're combatants, and because combatants do propaganda, etc. But he's been very clear. He, whether you believe him or not, he says we're trying to resist an occupation. We're choosing military targets. Yes, civilians have been killed. Yes, killing civilians on purpose, according to Nasrallah, like 9/11, is wrong. It's morally wrong. Now, you probably never heard that because all you hear is anyone who resists Israel's occupation, dirty, savage, violent Muslim who needs to be murdered, right? So Israel's celebrating today. We murdered another terrorist in their minds and a resistance fighter in the minds of others. So, but overall, Nasrallah chose the wrong path. He chose the path of violence. Now, you can say in southern Lebanon there was a war, and you can make any moral calculation you want in that regard. But in continuing to fight against Israel, so now Israel says, of course, that fighting them with violence is wrong, and I agree. They say fighting them diplomatically through the United Nations is also wrong. In fact, they called that terrorism. How could nonviolent diplomacy be terrorism? And if you call that terrorism, aren't you saying resisting our concentration camps is by definition terrorism, and you will be murdered for it? This is what Israel's become. It's so sad. So that leads me to how I think we should fight back against Israel. Now, so I just told you violence is definitely the wrong answer. Do not do that ever against any civilians or even military targets. You're not going to win it. It's both morally and strategically incorrect. Don't do it. Do not become the thing you're fighting. Okay. So now, does that mean you surrender and give up and go, oh, okay? No, of course not. So is there a way that we can influence American policy right now as things stand? No. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the two candidates, and obviously President Biden, work for Israel. Joe Biden's taking over $11 million. Kamala Harris taking over $5 million from AIPAC. Way more in AIPAC-related groups. Those groups openly say, we are here for the benefit of Israel, period. So you take money from them. You're basically saying, oh, I'm willing to, even though I'm a U.S. government official, I'm willing to work for the Israelis because AIPAC bribed me. Now it's legal bribe in America. In America, we legalize bribery. You can give unlimited campaign contributions, which brings us to Donald Trump. He's taken now about $300 million. So nothing. What Biden and Kamala Harris have taken is nothing compared to what Trump's taken. $300 million just from one family, the Adelson family, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, let alone AIPAC and all the other affiliated groups, etc. And he says, oh, they endorse me strongly. So that's it. I give them whatever they want. And he moved the embassy in Israel so because of Sheldon Adelson, and he acknowledges it publicly. So he literally sold out U.S. foreign policy to Israel. So you will get no help or relief from American politicians. They're liars. They take bribes, legalize bribes, and they serve the interest of all of their donors, whether they're drug companies or, in this case, the government of Israel. And in this case, the deeply right-wing, racist, tyrannical government of Israel. So there is no hope there. They will not turn around. Kamala Harris has almost no chance of changing policy. She doesn't want to. She's very happy to continue taking the legalized bribes. Valerie, thank you so much for the super chat. So, okay, so then what hope do you have? Well, so I'm going to suggest something else. Shame. Now, it's comical. Like, what are you going to shame the Israelis into doing the right thing? Well, number one, it's the only option we have. It's the only decent moral option that we have. It's nonviolent. It's non-physical. It is just ideological, philosophical, and so it's both the only option we have, and I think one that will prove to be very effective. And I know right now that seems ridiculous, and there's no way that'll work, etc. But my guess is that eventually it'll work so well that they'll say even speaking to an Israeli in an impolite way is terrorism. That's my guess, but we'll see. Okay. Because any resistance is terrorism. You must accept the concentration camps that they've run for the last 57 years on 5.5 million Palestinians. Okay. They say they're never going to free them. They're going to enslave them for potentially the rest of time because they think, well, they're Muslim. So they're violent savages who cannot govern themselves. They're the only people on earth who are incapable of governing themselves. That's why we've set up these giant concentration camps. And that's why we continue to take more and more of the land in the West Bank. And now we're demanding to steal, take for military reasons, sure, more land in Gaza. And we want more land in Lebanon. And we want to be able to attack Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, Tehran, the capital of Iran, Damascus, the capital of Syria. We want to be able to annihilate all of Gaza, displace 2 million people, take out all their buildings, their schools, their hospitals. We have an infinite right to kill and occupy Muslims because they're the violent ones. You see, I'm doing it already. I'm shaming Israel. And I want you guys to shame Israel. So now Israelis are going to be really mad. What? You can't do that to us. We get to occupy you. We get to kill you. We get to set up these open air camps. We get to do it for an endless period of time. We get to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. We get to do everything in the world. And you cannot even verbally object. They will say, I guarantee it. In fact, they're probably saying it right now in the comment section. So the reality is, yes, you can. You can shame the Israelis and not just their leaders. Now, guys, again, don't ever do anything to a civilian. Nothing physical, nothing violent, ever, ever, ever. If you do, you ruin the whole project. And you're not one of us. But when the Israeli flag should have been a beautiful thing. And there's a lot of people who get mad at me for saying that. And they'll get mad at me for not hating Jews. And they'll get mad at me for saying that what Israel's doing is breaking my heart when it comes to my Jewish friends and family. Okay. But sorry, I don't want the people inside Israel getting hurt. And I want Israel to be an awesome, beautiful nation that we all go to visit. And as part of the I keep saying League of Nations, but yes, part of civilized society. Okay. But if you're going to run open air camps, and they do, there's no, like, hardcore is right-wing Israelis are MAGA on steroids. You won't be able to talk to them. They're never going to listen to any reason or logic. They're going to say, oh, yeah, the occupation isn't an occupation. Well, can they govern themselves? No, of course not. The dirty, violent savages. Okay. All right. But then it is an occupation. It is an open air camp. It is a concentration camp where you've put them with no rights and you can kill them anytime you want. You can humiliate them, and you do. They can't govern themselves. They're not allowed to control their own borders. They're not allowed to have a military. They're not allowed to be a state. Well, that's a deep occupation. That's a camp. That's an open air camp where you have no rights and tyranny reigns. Those are obvious facts. And so Israel will say, we have to do it. Why do you have to do it? Because they're violent, dirty, savage Muslims. Well, your occupation is by definition racist. It's by definition tyrannical. So what do Israeli citizens? Because look, guys, Bashar al-Assad's a butcher in Syria, but there's no real voting in Syria. So there's nothing you could do about it. We don't send money to Syria. We bomb Syria from time to time, right? Nothing we can do about what they do, right? But Israel is a democracy, so they can vote to end their own, to end the tyranny. And they should vote that way. Look, I'm going to get back to it in a second. Katie Shirley, thank you for joining. Appreciate it. My Mindstorm M. Look at this. They write in, I consider myself center right, but TYT is the only political channel I'm a member of because I love how honest you all are. Honest reporting is so hard to find these days. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And look at how honest I'm being here, even though the American media and politicians will say, how dare you? You should be celebrating today. We have killed more Muslims. Israel will be able to occupy Palestine for longer. Yay, Israel. No, I don't say yay, Israel. Look, last thing, and I see all these Israeli flags in the comment section, for example. When I look at that, I think, oh, those are the people that have no shame at all. Those are the people who think it's such a great thing that we occupy 5.5 million people. We oppress them, humiliate them, denigrate them, and if anyone resists, we just murder them. And so this is what Israel has become. That's what that flag stands for now. So I shame you not just for what you've done to Palestinians, but how you've stained Judaism, the culture of Judaism, which I grew up in an area that was, had a lot of Jewish families in my hometown in New Jersey. So I know Jewish culture, and it's fantastic. It tells you to question authority, question the rabbi, emphasize education, and Jewish people have been terrific to me my whole life. And now the Israeli flag stands for oppression and occupation and tyranny. And it breaks my heart. And it should break your heart. And if you support Israel, you should be filled with deep shame for what they've done. And if you think you're going to kill your way out of this, Jesus Christ, what have you become? So how long is the occupation going to last? When will you finally remove your boot from their neck? And if you think the Palestinians are the aggressor, you've lost your mind. You're not attached to objective reality. No, Israel is the oppressors. That's not in question. The Palestinians do not have their boot on your neck. You have your boot filled with nukes and the American US military and every weapon in the world on their neck, and they have almost no weapons. They have almost no way of fighting back. They have no media. They have no anything. So if you're proud and you say, yes, this is what Israel was always meant to be, it wasn't meant to be a safe haven for Jews. It was meant to occupy and humiliate Muslims, who, by the way, for thousands of years protected the Jews from the Christians. Read history. The Ottomans went and rescued 400,000 Jews from the Spanish Inquisition. They were all going to be murdered. And the Ottomans saved them and brought them back to the Middle East, and they lived in peace for a million years. Did they live as equals? No, they were empires back then. And, we can get into historical context, etc. I'm not saying the Ottomans were angels. I'm not saying that Jews were treated perfectly throughout the Middle East, like we're humanity. Of course not, right? But did the Muslims treat Jews better than the Christians in Europe did? It's not even close. And this is not to blame today's Christians. You guys didn't do it, right? But if you read the history of it, Christians have been 10,000 times more brutal to Jews than Muslims have. But look, the Jews, it's heartbreaking beyond comprehension that they couldn't fight back against the Nazis. And thank God we saved them from that, okay, here in America. And I'm super proud to be an American, partly because of that. But so now that's a great thing that we saved them from that and from the Christians, both America and Muslims, during this, not just through the Spanish Inquisition, but literally for 1,000 years of pogroms and Holocausts and slaughter that the Christians did in Europe to the Jews. But the Palestinians are not the Germans. The Palestinians are not the Nazis. And you're in this PTSD from the Holocaust, which is understandable. But what they're doing here is not understandable and justifiable. They're saying, okay, now we're going to run the concentration camps. And now we're going to be the tyrants. And now we're going to take a population that cannot defend itself and crush them. And if anyone objects, we'll just kill them and call them terrorists. And it doesn't matter because America will keep sending us thank you gifts. So my only way of fighting back against that is personal, emotional, psychological, whatever you want to put on it. It's if you fly the Israeli flag, you should be ashamed of your country. And I hope to God that you turn around and you vote the right way, and not to, like, you've got to protect Israel. There's got to be two states. But the minute you free the Palestinians and you end the occupation, this whole thing's over. I'm back on your side. The Palestinians, the Lebanese, anyone should not be allowed to fire any rockets against you. A peace deal means peace. That's what you're doing. But if you don't do that and you vote for people like Netanyahu, who has very, very, very clearly declared that there will never be a Palestinian state and he will oppress them and be their tyrants forever, then you're saying, I vote for tyranny. I vote for dictatorship in the Palestinian territories. I vote for oppression. I vote. So if you vote for oppression and tyranny and racism and colonialism and imperialism, and you vote for stealing other people's land, well, then you should be ashamed. I don't want Israel to live like that. I don't want the Israeli flag to stand for that. I want Israel to turn around, and I believe that it can. But until it does, the only recourse the rest of us civilians have throughout the world is to shame them, but don't ever make it physical. Ever, ever, ever. And do not do it to random Jewish people. They're not Israelis. Get it through your head. Not every Jewish person is Israeli. In fact, here in America, they're Americans. So do not do that. But if somebody says, I support Israel's occupation of Palestine, well, they're a bad person. They're an immoral person. Maybe they're not immoral overall. The world is complicated, as I just told you in this video. But on that opinion, in that stance, they are very immoral. They're deeply immoral. Look, I don't really believe in the words and the concepts of good and evil, right? So I hesitate to call anything evil, but immoral, absolutely. Every Israeli that doesn't try to end the occupation is acting immorally and should be filled with shame. So that's my proposal. And I know that a lot of people in the Middle East will say not good enough. And I know that a lot of people in America will say, how dare you? Even you have spoken ill of Israel, the greatest crime in America. And there are politicians who have suggested that people like me, even for criticizing Israel, should be arrested. And Trump says not only arrested, but deported, because we don't believe in freedom of speech if you're criticizing the most important thing in America, the thing that's not actually in America, Israel. And guys, again, one last thing here. And before I do the last thing, Karen Bosick Steele, you're right. Thank you for being a member. And she says Netanyahu wants America in this conflict, especially before the election. If Trump wins, endless funding, weapons, and U.S. asylum if it's ever over. Yeah, all of that is true. Andrew Dickens, thank you. Martin Alejandrez, and I missed so many others here. Box, as always. Sorry if I missed you guys. And I appreciate all the super chats and all the member signups. And that's how we do. Obviously, you can tell we're not run by giant corporations. We're not run by the U.S. government. We don't do propaganda for any government. The only people we have is you guys, and that greatly frustrates the people in power because you're our base of power and they can't take you away. So thank you guys for having big open hearts and open minds and becoming members, etc. But the last thing I'll say is, so the people in the Middle East might say my tactic is not nearly good enough. And people here in America, the politicians, the media will say, how dare you? How dare you even criticize Israel? And then they'll pretend that they're in favor of freedom. They'll pretend that the Israelis are not in charge here, that the hundreds of millions that AIPAC and the Adelsons spent don't matter to U.S. politicians. They'll say ludicrous, outrageous, like borderline insane comments like that. But for the people who value truth and honesty, we need to be the good guys. We need to be the moral ones, and we also have to be the honest ones. And of course, AIPAC and others here have completely captured our government, and they're not alone. Like I've told you 100 times, it's super easy to do. There's things like the sugar industry. It's called Big Sugar. I'm not kidding. It's and largely out of Florida, but it's in other places too, obviously. And they give a ton of money to politicians, and then the politicians cheat on behalf of the sugar industry. Anyone can buy U.S. politicians. That is not particular to Israel. But Israel, logically, smartly, has bought the U.S. politicians and controls them almost completely. Ironically, there's a bunch of brave Jewish politicians here in America who are Americans who go, no, you're not going to get to call me a terrorist. You're not going to get to call me an anti-Semite. Bernie Sanders is the leader of that group, and that's why we love him. Our leader is a Jewish American, Bernie Sanders. Okay. And because he's a moral, decent, honest person who's always fought for the right things. And so Israel, please turn around. If you don't turn around, you're going to be considered a rogue. Here, I'm going to do it. Disgusting, racist, abusive, tyrannical government that says democracy for me and concentration camps for you. If it makes you feel better to call it something else, oh no, it's an open air camp. It's an open air prison. It's not an occupation. They have no rights, and we can kill them anytime we want. We can cut off their food, their water, their electricity. We can denigrate them. We could humiliate them anytime we want, but it's not an occupation. Okay, you could tell yourself pretty little lies. But the reality is Israel is doing a shameful, disgusting occupation of the Palestinians. Until they free the Palestinians, they should live in shame.